on Monday, July the 18th. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the open and closed meeting minutes and the approval of the agenda itself. And I believe we have one addition to the agenda.
Yes. Rolf Nickelmo, when he gets here, because he is coming, will present a quick item that has to do with the agreement for the purchase of a chiller at the ice arena. Since the Port Authority is a property owner, there needs to be an agreement that allows access, and that's what he has put together here and would like for you guys to just take a quick look at today. So we can add that under new business, if you think that's okay.
That'd be fine. Has everybody had a chance to read the minutes? If so, does somebody wish to make the motion to approve them?
I just have one minor correction under Port Authority land use. It says Chair Hick. And I know you're pretty rural, but we should probably add an S on that.
Right.
Other than that, I would make the aforementioned motion to approve.
Thank you, Tom. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Rebecca. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those against, same sign. The agenda and the minutes are approved. The second item on the agenda is an update on the dairy property. And we will call upon Clara to kick the meeting piece off.
Thank you, court members, for being here today. Yes, as a standing item that we have on all of our agendas, we will once again discuss the dairy property. And I have a not so great update from the last time that we met and discussed this project, but as you recall, the Port Authority and City Council have been in partnership on this project since 2016. At the beginning of, in 2016, the city entered into an agreement with LCCMR for $600,000 through the LCCMR appropriations, provided that we finished out a grant agreement, etc. So after several years going back and forth, we were getting close to closing that project out. When one of the last items was an appraisal. And if you recall, we had an appraisal that failed. The DNR saw it and said, nope, this doesn't meet the standards that we're looking for. We disagree with points of it. We're handing this back to you. At that point, we were only, I think, 4 or 5 months out from the end of the grant period, which was June 30th. And so we scrambled to get a new appraisal done. We stuck with the same appraisal company, Shanahan Companies, and they did come through with a second appraisal that was also ultimately not approved by the DNR. So that went into the DNR just days before the grant closure, leaving no time for any recourse. So at this point in time, the $600,000 that were appropriated from the LCCMR to the city of Fergus Falls will not be transferred. We are exploring all of our options, both legislatively and otherwise, to see how we can remedy this problem now. But we are also in discussions with our lobbyist about other opportunities to find some of that funding that we are now missing on this project. So again, the Port Authority is the owner of the property. The money would be going to the city of Fergus Falls, and that would have facilitated the transfer of the river buffer parcel from full port ownership over to city ownership. So since that $600,000 was not appropriated at this time, that process also did not take place, so the port continues to be the sole owner of the dairy site. So, not the update that I think we were all hoping to hear, but it is the reality of the situation. So, we also have some updates on revolving loan fund status that I think Bill can address, and then maybe we can go into some questions or discussion.
Sounds good. Thank you, Clara. Also, we talked about the, another couple funding sources for that dairy project was the revolving loan fund, which you had said we were awarded a revolving loan from Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, so DEED, for $1.23 million. We should be able to completely draw that loan down. We still have, we're probably $150-some thousand to draw down on that. And that is looking like that shouldn't be a problem. We had another program, was the demolition loan for $851,510. There is going to be about $296,000 left on the table for that loan program because DEED is not, they've gone through all our costs for the project. Will only, they allow only eligible costs in their interpretation for that. And so therefore, there's $296,000 of that we are not able to draw down at this time. We have been pushing them on, different things on that, but that loan also is pretty much done as of June 30th into July here. We've still been working with them. We're actually going on the phone with them again tomorrow. So that $290,000, we'll have to look up a portion of that. Will we have to fund some other way? And we'll have to determine that because obviously we've accumulated the costs over here in the project fund, whether we would have to fund that internally or from the port. We'll have to look through that. I'll work with Brian, our city engineer, on that. The fact of that is that there weren't enough eligible costs under that program because, of course, they were just very much just on the demo of those buildings. So, we've always built that in as a full funding source, but not able to draw all that down. So we're continuing to work on that, but giving you that update today as well, so. Okay.
So anybody got any good news?
It's a beautiful site. It's been nicely cleaned up.
Yep.
It will be used well someday.
Yeah.
It's probably neither here nor there, but I'm forgetting what the reasons were that the DNR rejected. I know back in March, I think it had something to do with the buffer. They had disagreements on that, or why? What was the appraisal issue that allowed them just to reject that?
So we did data request to learn more about that rejection because initially all we were told was it was rejected, end of story. So it's a very involved process and it involves a lot of appraisal jargon that I am not an appraiser, so I do not fully understand it, but I wouldn't say it had anything necessarily to do with the river buffer parcel, but in fact it was the full site overall that there were, the appraisers did not agree on the final price of what it would be, and there were some questions about the comps, et cetera.
Sure. So they're saying it's overvalued or undervalued, how you want to look at that, and they don't think they don't want to fund it.
Correct.
Essentially, yeah.
And we have no rights to.
At that point, they did allow us to do a second appraisal, so that would have been the end of it if we hadn't continued to push. So we did get to do the second appraisal. Unfortunately, it was a similar outcome the second time around.
The perception is that we backed into the $1 million. That, our grant funding was $600,000 on $1 million. And so therefore, it seems like that's the assumption they came to, was that we made the value meet the 600,000 contribution. And there's no, they won't tell us what they think it should be valued at. It's not, they won't come back and say, well, we only believe it's worth 600,000. And so therefore, you only get 60% of the 600,000. And so, is there kind of, is there blame for different parties? Sure. Did the city do everything perfectly? No. Did the appraiser do everything? Did the DNR? We could spend a lot of time and effort and money trying to analyze why and what, but the outcome is the DNR has said no, and they're not going to change their minds. We did meet, as Clara said, with our lobbyist, and he's spoken to, as well as actually Jordan Rasmussen helped to try to kind of like find out more and why, but the DNR just put up a blank wall and pretty much said it doesn't meet our criteria, so therefore we're not going to fund it.
There were some personnel issues with the appraisal company itself, so we can tie some of it back to timelines relating to that. But there's, again, no fix for it at this point since we are where we are. So,
So we're short how much then? 600 plus
600.
290? Is that-
Yep, $1 million, basically.
Yeah, and really the 290, when we were looking at our estimates, like we would have had, if we used all of our funding sources, we actually would have had a little extra in sources. So when it's all said and done, we're maybe 750 short. So hopefully, like Clara said, we still want to explore ways to try and get that 600,000. We don't want to give up necessarily. It's just maybe we have to.
And that's kind of the thing. I mean, I think maybe we can to sow some seeds, but I think the port's got some options. Obviously, this city is actually the one that's 600,000 short, not the Port Authority. So it's not our problem. We're still going to sell it for $1 million. We've got a sales agreement.
That sales agreement did lapse.
Oh, thanks, Bill. Yeah. But ultimately, we can keep the land. We can sell more of the land, because obviously the LCCMR grant sliced off, almost a third of the property. So, we could look at reconfiguring, theoretically we could sell it without a trail, but I don't think that would be, the general consensus of people, that it was always purchased on the basis that we would have a trail down there. But we could probably lessen the amount of land that gets used for a trail. We can obviously apply again, and but that will obviously cost us yet another appraisal. And it seems like the DNR appraiser doesn't believe that outstate Minnesota has that sort of value of land. And if you talk to them about like Bemidji, then they say that that's too far away to be considered close to Fergus, despite the fact that we're trying to emulate in the sense of the word of what Bemidji did by building trails on a river and adding value to the community. So it's we have to do some exploring. Brian?
But, excuse me, so this has nothing to do with the remainder of the property that we have RFPs out right now?
So if you recall, the RFP process closed quite some time ago. So
Okay.
there is no active RFP on that property.
But in the future, when we decide to sell that parcel, what's going on with the buffer has nothing to do with this?
Right. The port is the sole owner of that
And
site.
if we need to, if we do get somebody who's interested, if we have to, and the city is not able to rectify this, we can dig further into that buffer and make the parcel larger.
Exactly.
Rebecca, do you?
Thanks, that helps.
How did you know I had a question? I didn't even raise my hand. I had that look.
Yeah.
So, what would it cost for us to do another assessment? And do we have to wait a certain time period? And would it even be worth it?
Another appraisal.
Okay.
I mean, we could do another appraisal. It would have absolutely nothing to
Appraisal,
do with the LCCMR anymore. So there'd be no waiting
Right.
anything back and forth with the DNR. We could just do it on our own.
So there wouldn't be even a point to doing it.
We don't even really have a need to do one
Right.
at this point though, right?
Probably not.
Right.
But we can keep it in our back
Scratch
pocket.
that.
So, like, what's next? When do we have to start spending money on it?
What do we owe when?
Yeah, that's a better question. There we go.
I mean, I would say that's kind of like, probably we need an update on the loans when we have to start repaying the loans, because that would be ultimately, the port will have to probably bond for
Board did
some.
vote several months ago to begin making those loan payments based solely on the cash that the port had available at the time. So we have started.
Should I give a little update on
Yeah.
that?
Yep.
Is that okay?
Yep.
I'll be quick with that one. Get you clean copies here for you. These are preliminary financial statements as of today. Literally kind of finished putting these together in the last hour, so I know I'll have a couple adjustments coming, but
Thanks.
it gives us a ballpark. So to speak from. So like Clara mentioned, the Port Authority did act quite some time ago saying that, you know, the payments for the dairy loans, that demo and the revolving loan fund that I mentioned, are starting now in August. So August 15th, we have to make our first payments on those. You as the Port Authority only agreed to transfer money to that debt service fund for the first payment. So we are building in the 2023 levy other dollars, levy dollars to make payments thereafter. So it's just the first one, and it would have been about $114,000. That's if we were to draw down the entire balance. So between those two, and when we come back with you with a proposed budget, probably at the next meeting, things won't quite mesh up, and that is because we have a payment due August 15th, and then one February 15th of 2023, but those all relate to levy dollars from this year. You know, a city at a port authority is going to collect dollars through 22, and then you want to collect all that by the end of January to make that final payment in February. That's the way the bonds are structured. So, but they fall in 2 fiscal years for us. So, long story, longer on that one, I guess. So 114 on that. Also at this cash balance, we are holding $60,000. Remember, we sold that gravel from the dairy site? Well, we need to transfer that over to the project fund as well. That cash is sitting in here. So you can see we have Port Authority cash of $377,000. So we could see under the full draw scenario, $114,000 of that coming out for those first dairy payments. Now, that will be somewhat lower because we're not drawing down the demo loan completely. And then the $60,000 over to the dairy, which would bring that down to $203,000. I'm still talking that 114 because if we were to finance something internally, we'd have to pay that back too, the same we would paying it back to deeds. So we've got to work that together as we get this project to close out. We'll come back with more on that in the future. So mainly I wanted to show you these financials so you can see where the cash balances are sitting as of today. And that's what you have on the first there. The larger portion is $566,000. That's cash we're holding for operating the CBHH facility. On the last page of it, you'll see I've noticed, highlighted the interest earnings. It's actually interest losses this year, showing $43,000. I need to allocate some of that to that CBHH account. They're the higher cash balance. They need to take a bigger portion of that. Don't have those numbers yet. We'll be working on that. So that I know will change. But you can see as of right now, back on the first page, we have due to other funds, the $1.3 million. That relates to the dairy project. We're carrying those costs over on the city side. And when we were going to get all these transactions done, then we'd pay that money over to the project. So I think that's all I'll say for now, so we don't belabor your time with that. I will come back with even cleaner financials as we come back with the budget probably next meeting too. But don't be scared to call me with questions in the interim as well. So But again, just the first payments on the dairy, we're looking to implement tax levies. Ultimately, then if we can sell the property, we use those sales proceeds to pay this down and hopefully eliminate levies at some point going into the future as well.
Does that help?
Yeah, I do want to go back to the LCCMR denial, or I guess the DNR denial, because I hear that it was many things, perhaps, or entities, but we can only control like what we like. Are there things that we have learned along the way? Was there a timeline issue? Was there the right people at the table to move it forward, to stay on top of it? I'm getting a little worried about this, that we're a little, like, it feels like we're almost a step behind with this process. Like, the RFP closes months ago. What are we doing with that? We're up to the time limit with this appraisal getting done. Are there things that as a group we need to do more of? Or is there more city staff stuff? Is there, or is it just outside?
So the RFP process was completely run by the port. So you guys voted to close that out and not re-engage in that process when that happened, leaving the door open obviously for that to continue in the future.
I think last time we asked that we look
Make some
into why
changes.
it's not, no one's having interest in it.
Which we've continued to do, but we have not re-engaged in a new RFP process at this point. And I think those processes are separate from each other. So the LCCMR process has been ongoing since 2016, has its own timelines and deadlines. The RFP process is again run by the port. So we can have whatever kinds of timelines, deadlines, et cetera, that we want. I think one of the things that we've learned through this LCCMR process is that maybe we did place trust in an appraisal company that we now know was maybe not the right trust to place, but it was the only option available to us this second time around. So.
And the appraisers had to be approved by the DNR. You can't just choose another appraiser. They had to be on a qualified list, and so this group was on their qualified list. And obviously they had done the majority of the work, and then technically we got feedback on the first rejection, and that got incorporated, but it still wasn't sufficient for them, and they still come back to this value being greater, and they don't pay out pro rata. It's a black and white scenario.
We also do want to be careful how we respond to some of your questions, just because we don't know quite where we're going to finish all this out, where it's all going to work out. So I know I want to be careful.
One thing that would help is just maybe, and I can't find in my notes, you probably already told us, but like what's the total project or estimated project? We've got this payable here, which helps, 1.3 million, but we don't need it today, but maybe next month. Just here's the total project size, here's our sources and uses thing, here's the gap, and then what's the potential value irrespective of this appraisal? What's a realistic,
Certainly do that. I could run through sources and uses right now if you'd like briefly. I actually grabbed a cheat sheet.
Okay, well, I don't want to take this up.
It's up to you.
I'm fine next month too.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's not like we're not looking at things. What I would like to do, everybody, what we're looking into are remedies. Remedies available to the Port Authority to address some of the discrepancies that this appraisal perhaps brings forth. And perhaps what we need to do is have a special meeting sometime in the next few weeks after we've had a chance to kind of form some legal opinions, probably a closed session to discuss remedies and options available to the Port Authority moving forward from a legal perspective. So, not saying we're doing anything yet, but I think you have the right and we have the obligation to show you what remedies are available. And then I guess I would ask permission to perhaps engage Chad Fellstool further in that regard as well, to perhaps him and I can come before you and give you some more information.
I mean, I appreciate that. I think just understanding kind of the gap a little bit better, the potential sales value, what's the gap once we sell it all, and we're not going to know until we actually do that. But I think that would help us. Like, oh, okay, it is what it is, and
it is what it is. But what you gain here is riverfront. That's not bad either.
And unfortunately, the DNR doesn't put value on the riverfront, which is irony.
But you also gain some. The door kind of opens again.
sure,
To
different types of development.
Sure. I mean, and maybe a different type of development is more fitting for the property, and maybe you'd have more interest, if it included the riverfront.
Makes sense. So yeah, you do not have to do that tonight. Just maybe next month or something.
Yeah, I mean, but I mean, at least from a remedy perspective, I mean, I'm happy to come back during either next month or at a special meeting, whatever you'd like. It doesn't matter.
Just on a side note, we've got about $3.1 million into this project so far. That's where, yep, $3,153,000.
Would that help, Bridget?
Well, it sounds like we'll continue discussions
Yep.
with the grant portion. I guess the
Possibly
second,
a closed meeting.
with possibly a closed meeting, I think the second piece is just what we're gonna do with that RFP and whether or not city staff feels there's some urgency around continuing with that, or if the port needs to.
I think one of the other
More
reasons on the RFP was we talked about, obviously, had we received this funding, then that piece of property would have been sold off and belonged to the city, then the RFP would be, that would add something to the RFP to say that this property is going to be a trail for certain. And I think we need to revisit now the RFP as to what are we actually going to sell?
Well, I
Yeah.
think during those meetings when we were discussing the RFP, that's when the dairy subcommittee got put back together. So I've continued meeting with Steve Erickson, who's been placed on that committee, and Anthony Hicks, who's been placed on that committee. So conversations have continued. The timing just hasn't been great, what with this grant process and some of the other legal proceedings that are also taking place on the property.
So we will probably come back to this on a special meeting.
Can I say a couple words about this appraisal process that maybe should be said?
Well, don't get into too much detail, Steve.
No, I won't.
Yeah, that will get us into trouble.
What I want to say is,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that we selected the wrong appraiser. The first appraisal was rejected for its own reasons. The second appraisal was rejected for completely different reasons. And what he said in his final analysis was that we had more time, we could have solved these problems. But that issue was the valuation of the comparables, how they were looked at by the appraiser and the review appraiser. So to say it was rejected because it was no good or any other reason, I think is a misstatement. The other thing is, both of the review appraisers' specialty is not in commercial property. It's in conservation easements of farmland. In as far as this current review appraiser, the specialty is forest and wetlands. I don't think that, that is necessarily the type of person we're looking for. I think if you're going to go back through another appraiser with the DNR, there needs to be a discussion of what is the goal here? Is the goal to try to minimize the amount of the value? Is the goal to try to detail every point that is required? In other words, do we have to have the certificate of real estate value in order to say that public records say that this property sold for this number of dollars? So that's what I would like to say about that.
Thanks, Steve. The next item on the agenda is a proposal for a preliminary engineering report for the former Norgren property. This is a subject we've kind of talked about in the past, that part of that property is already platted. And, as there is a need for housing development, the city, Port Authority collectively owns a piece of land that has already got some preliminary platting in place. And so this is to look at the next step forward on taking a portion of this piece of land and moving hopefully along an agenda to get houses on it.
Yes.
Over to Clara.
Yep, so this is a proposal that has come to us from Interstate Engineering through our engineering department here at City Hall. You do not have to make any decisions on this proposal tonight, especially in light of the fact that we are likely going to be talking about budget at our next coming meetings. So it is possible that you will want to compare the project costs of this with some of the other items that we'll be discussing with the budget. But we do have it. I figured we could start the discussion tonight at the very least. So essentially this proposal would be to come up with a plan for utilities on the platted portion of the Norgren property, like Anthony said. So that would include where water, sewer would be, the grading of sites for building, and the placement of roads. And they would be able to do this work within about 90 days is what the contract says, and it would be a price tag of $20,000 if we choose to go down this road right now. When the port has been talking in the past, we've obviously been focusing a lot on the dairy property, but we've also wanted to keep an eye on the Norgren property, which we've owned for a long time. We recognize that housing is a need in this community. This is land that we own that's platted. It's possible that if we do have some sort of a utility plan that can help us make some plans for the future to ensure that development does occur. So my suggestion as a staff member would be to at least entertain entering into this proposal, maybe not necessarily tonight, but maybe next meeting when we've discussed a little bit further with budget. But I do think it is something that we should undertake.
Any thoughts, questions on
I have
the
a
property? Go, Tom.
Does it, and maybe Natalia, you have insight on this too, I don't know. Have we heard anything from builders as far as, is there a need for lots right now, or is that one thing that's holding that back, or is it?
For lots with utilities, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
That's why the city has entered into the TIF agreement with Donovan for the housing project by the Kirkbride. There are infill lots here and there in town, but there is not an identified location for housing growth like what we would need to see to fill the gaps.
Okay.
So, and obviously if Natalia has more that she'd like to add to that, she may.
It's accurate. I mean, most of the developers that we talk to, it would be more economical for them to obviously build them on sites with utilities. Same with commercial. So.
So, and it's typical for us to lead in that? Is that typical? Wouldn't they do it if they had to?
I would say it's a Port Authority owned property. Perhaps that's more typical of publicly owned land, but I think if a developer were interested, no, this would probably not be typical.
Okay. I mean, I think if we should do it, we should just do it unless there's a budget issue. The other question I have is, it's on their paper, so I don't know, Rolf, you must go through all this stuff, but normally we do it on our contract, wouldn't we? Or do we just renew theirs, or?
You want to do anything this evening, or leave it till the budget next month? I mean, that's...
Next month, Brian will hopefully also be here. He can talk a little bit more about the actual process, how he worked with Interstate to come up with this, but he is not well today, so he is not with us.
And, you know, often this all is part of when we're putting a project together and looking at that. And historically, you know, you're looking at this development, you want to put that out there, you come up with pre-design, you get these designs in, and then you come up with the way you're going to pay for it, the entire project, not just the pre-design. Historically, it's always been special assessments. So, you know, the owners of the lots need to share in that. So that's kind of also why I'd like you to maybe wait till next month. We get with Brian a little bit more, because I'd like to see the bigger picture, because infrastructure is so expensive right now, and that's what we're seeing. We're doing, you know, this project up by the RTC differently than we've done in the past.
Makes sense.
So,
I would be happy to wait till next month.
great.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Fine.
But I think it's a good concept. I mean,
Right.
I think Clara's spot on with, you know, housing is important. We need to look at it. I think we just,
How about, you know, just anecdotally, are we seeing a trend in the price of building materials? Is that staying about the same? Is it starting to go down? Anybody have their finger on that pulse?
It's meant to be coming down.
Okay, that'd be good.
What I've heard is that some pricing is going down, but not all pricing is going down, and some pricing remains like on an upward trend.
Okay. Yeah, so it's, okay, just curious, thank you.
Would you like to talk about I-94?
Yep. Okay, so several months ago, when we had the owner of I-94 Speedway in to discuss the lease, they currently hold a lease. Actually, Jill, can you pull up, it should just be a PDF of the site. Yep, just click on Adobe down on the bottom. Yep. One of the questions they asked when we were discussing this lease is, first of all, they wanted a longer term lease, which Port was fine with. We entered into that. Then they had also asked, well, would it be an option for us to enter into a right of first refusal with the Port Authority? So if an interested buyer does come along for this Port-owned property, they would be informed and be able to make an offer in response to that. So we've brought the language forward of a right of first refusal for discussion. I think, Rolf, do you want to talk about it at all? I think the biggest question in my mind is it a benefit to the Port to enter into a right of first refusal with them for this property? Discuss.
Yeah, again, we have done this in the past with this entity to give them the opportunity to purchase a parcel that's next to their piece, provided if we get a fair offer on it, and we're thinking of exercising and entering into that offer, then they would have the first opportunity to match the offer that we receive, and we would be obligated to sell it to them. You know, what's the benefit to the Port? Well, I mean, there probably isn't any, but the reality is it's being neighborly, and it's giving them an opportunity to expand if necessary. One might ask, well, if they want it so bad, why don't they just buy it now? But that maybe just isn't in the works. And so they we did this 3 years ago too, I believe, and it was valid for a period of time for upwards of 3 years. This agreement is what they're requesting. It terminates on December 31st, 2025, which means any day thereafter, if we receive an offer and we are inclined to accept it, then we do not have to present it to them for their right to match it.
Was it 25 or 23, Rolf?
Exactly.
Was it 25 or 23?
25.
Okay.
2025. So, yeah. And that might limit people wanting to make offers as well. I mean, because of the fact that they know that there's a, why would I make an offer if you're only going to turn around and give it to them? But they may decline. So,
It does say 23 in the
2023.
agreement.
oh, it does?
Yep, on item 13.
Yeah, mine says 25.
Okay.
So,
I didn't change it.
I don't know either, I just printed it off. So,
Is yours
so
23?
is it 23 in the packet?
Yeah, but it's highlighted in red, so I think you would contemplate.
Oh,
Oh, so, I mean, if you want to have it go through 2023, fine, I don't care, it doesn't matter to me. So, why don't you tell me a date you want this thing to terminate?
It's not detrimental to have it, so I don't think it matters.
I don't care. It's, you want it 2025, 2024, 2023, or the,
I think that matters.
Joe was just saying, Ralph, that the lease that they signed expires December 31st of 2023, so this language would allow them to expire at the same time.
okay.
Which makes some sense.
Okay. Then they both would expire. 2023.
2023. Consensus is 2023.
Sure.
Sure.
Okay, we just need a motion authorizing.
So thank you, Steve.
I'll second.
And thank you, Caroline. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those against, same sign. Hearing none, the motion is approved. The next item on the agenda was the addition for the easement on the chiller in the school, which we'll call upon Rolf again.
Thank you. Well, the city is poised to be the proud owner of the Vittler, three of them, the Vittler VMC 450 XL, which is a compressor. Three of them that basically are the chilling systems at the community ice arena. The city's going to buy the chiller. I don't know how. Bill can go into the financial details if you have any questions about that. But the Port Authority is the entity that has ownership of the structure called the community ice arena. You have what's called a space lease and a ground lease to the structure. School district owns everything underneath. The chiller is located on school property together with other utilities such as water and sewer and electrical. You know, we had to have this massive agreement to allow a shared use of the utilities. And one of the functions that we have is this chiller. And originally the chiller was used by the school district and the community ice arena to make ice. It was taxing on the system to make ice in the summer and to refrigerate and offer air conditioning to the school. And so I think its use has been limited, but the school is looking at and has, I think, secured and bought a new chiller that I think is being installed. I don't know if it is or isn't. And the agreement is the city will buy your old chiller. So what I have before you is we had to do a change to the what's called the utility license, which is the agreement that allows the city to go in and fix utilities that are on school property. And so this is going to be an additional thing that's on school property that we need access to in case of for maintenance, repair, upkeep, that type of stuff. So what I have before you is the first amendment to the utility license that recognizes the chiller system is on school property. We need access to it. The school district is going to pass this as well. This has been reviewed by the school district's attorney as well, Mr. Feldstuhl. And we are in agreement as to its terms and recommend that we enter into this, or at least give permission to enter into this at such time as the chiller purchase with the city is closed. So it just requires a motion. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
How do we fund it?
So the city is purchasing that, and we do have funds in a special revenue fund, so the city will pay cash for that. Yep. So we're not financing the purchase.
Maintenance, we do or same.
Yep, we'll have to work maintenance in through the operating budget of the city. So
I see.
it's these puzzle pieces coming together. the port then also has an agreement with the city that the city is completely responsible for the maintenance and all that of the arena that you own. You own the structure, like Rolf said.
We had to do it that way because this was funded through the port. And when the bonds were in place, we were repaying the bonds, and still ownership had to stay with the port for
Yeah.
that purpose. And so, I mean, that's why it's like that. I mean, it doesn't have to be. I mean, it can stay that way. I don't think anyone really cares.
Right.
Because of the agreements are in place between the port and the city. It could also be, assumed by the city at some point in time if the port was tired of dealing with this property. But it's,
Thanks.
yeah.
Down the road, is there an advantage to that from a cleaning it up perspective? For that?
I mean, in essence, the city is running the place.
Yeah.
There may be some benefit just to kind of actually have what the documents represent, what's actually happening.
Yeah.
Will be an insurance or liability thing, right? But you guys have already assessed, so if there's no difference there.
And we're all on the same insurance.
Yeah.
The port and the city are on the same
It's all under
policy.
the same umbrella.
Yep.
No, it doesn't matter. It's just an additional administrative step, but
Yep.
again,
Thank you.
don't matter to me.
Anybody else got any questions on that? If not, we'd look for a motion to adopt an easement.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Bridget. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Tom. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
All those against, same sign. Hearing none, the motion is approved. Is there any other business to come before the Port Authority this evening? You didn't make it, Andrew. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Yeah.